Welcome to Take It Off, the podcast where we ditch the heavy layers and get real about who we truly are beneath it all. I'm Julie, and together with my co-host and friend Jess, we'll share our own stories and explore the triumphs and tribulations of being a woman in today's world. Let's get real, have some laughs, and inspire each other to embrace our true selves. Welcome to Take It Off.
Hello and welcome back. We are coming to you a little bit late this week because we needed a little extra R&R on our end.
Yes, mostly my end. Thank you for your grace this past week and a half. And you can probably notice just a touch of leftover sickness, sinus infection in my voice.
Your voice is just like deeper and raspy.
Okay.
You should go with it.
Okay. I'm just going to own the raspiness.
Yes.
But yes, I needed this. I'm so glad that we're back.
Yes, it feels good to be back. And I think if there's one thing that we have both learned over the past year or two, it is, well, I won't say it maybe past tense. We're still learning. We're actively learning.
Yes.
It is a process, but that we rest when we need rest. Yes. And that, it's what comes first. So appropriately, today we are talking about burnout and burnout cycles. And I think the more we engage with our communities, the more we realize that the women around us are experiencing the same symptoms of burnout. Mm-hmm. And, we start to ask ourselves, why do we feel these things? Is it all of these like roles that we're all here actively trying to like strip away together, or what else is there to it? So Julie and I have both, as we've talked about, made some major shifts in the past year. And I think at the root of some of those shifts is burnout. So Julie, I want to flip it to you. I mean, do you want to talk about how you got here through the lens of like your burnout story?
Yeah. And I appreciate what you said about, the more we talk about this with friends, people in our maybe larger circles, I realize that I'm not alone in my burnout story, and it makes it easier to talk about it. Mm-hmm. And so that's how, I got to today where I'm able to share it, with you and with our podcast audience. But my experience with burnout was about 1.5 years ago. And as I look back on that experience, and I think I've said this before, but this podcast is almost like therapy for me. It's really forced me to take time to pause and to look back and really understand the things that have happened in my life and why they happened. So with this situation, I took some time to look back and really think about my burnout experience. And when I boiled it down, there were really 3 things that I think contributed to it. I was in a very demanding job, which I enjoyed. But as I look back on it, I was out of alignment. And we talk about this a lot. And at the time, I didn't have a clear set of values for myself. So I didn't even realize that being out of alignment was a thing. But as I look back on it now and reflect, I know that's what it was. So I was out of alignment, meaning I know now about myself, things that I value, making a difference, growth, relationships. I just wasn't getting enough of it in that role. The other thing I realized, and I always love sharing authors and books that I love, and Daniel Pink is one of my favorites. And so have you heard about his or read about his challenge decision latitude matrix?
No, I've never heard of that.
Okay, so he wrote a book called Drive, and it's all about what motivates us. And it's a few years old, but it's still relevant. And what he talks about in there are these 4 quadrants. And when you find yourself in a high challenge, meaning high demanding role, with low decision latitude, meaning you don't have a lot of control over your day-to-day activity or, decisioning, it can lead to burnout. Mm-hmm. And I also think that's where I was in my job at the time. And then finally, I am a ruminator like nobody else. And I'm trying to cure myself of it, but I'm not cured. And so when I think about that period of time in my life, I mean, I was the ruminating queen. I was a chronic ruminator. And what I've actually read now about rumination is that women are more prone to it because of the high value that we place on relationships. So when we have an interaction with somebody and it doesn't go exactly as we planned, it weighs on us. And for me, it was weighing on me in I couldn't sleep at night. I couldn't be present because I was constantly like ruminating.
Like repeating those
Yes.
conversations and what went wrong.
Over and over again.
Like your part in
Yes.
what went wrong, maybe,
Yes.
like that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But mostly me. Like nobody else was at fault. It was just all my fault.
Oh, yeah.
So I think it's, it's those three things. I was out of alignment. I, was in a really demanding role where, right or wrong, I felt like maybe I didn't have as much decision authority, or I wasn't courageous enough to make the decisions that I needed to make. And then this like rumination that I couldn't stop, right? And so it all culminated one night, and I can remember it vividly. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't get back to sleep. And so, I don't know, it was like 2 a.m. and I just was like, all right, might as well like start my day. And so I started reading some work that I had to do. And then I thought, I'm going to go to yoga at 6 a.m., which, I'm trying to embrace the yoga life. But I wasn't a regular yogi at the time, nor am I now. But I like went to the yoga class and the instructor didn't show up. And so then it was like, here I am, like trying to like break this cycle, like get help, like feel better. And I couldn't even do that. And so I came back home and I was just so detached. I was exhausted. I couldn't go into work. And so I ended up calling my doctor and having a really vulnerable conversation with her. Ultimately, ended up getting some medication to help with the anxiety. And that helped. And what I will say also helped was that, call it divine intervention or just really good timing. We had a family vacation planned for shortly after that. And so I thought, if I can only get to the vacation, that'll be my interruption, right? So we got to the vacation, starting to feel better. And I found myself sitting on the lake, not reading a book or just enjoying myself, but on LinkedIn scrolling job posts. And I found this job that was what I was learning aligned with the things that were important to me. And it was a job that like I didn't even know existed. It was working for an organization that is really about elevating women in the workplace, and it was an operations job. And that was the first thing that got me thinking, wow, like maybe there's something else that I could do that would be aligned with what I think my values are, because I wasn't exactly clear on them yet. And also in a position where it's high challenge, but maybe I'd have a little more authority over my day-to-day decisions. And that's really what started me on this journry.
Wow. So wait, so did you go after that job then?
That was a really long-winded answer to your question about my burnout experience. Yeah, I then, put my resume together and I applied for the job. It ultimately didn't work out, but it was the catalyst that got me thinking about what more could be out there.
Yeah, it's so good that you saw that like moment and you were able to, even if you were sort of like hopeful or just excited about this position, it was equally as important of a catalyst not pursuing that road, because it is sort of like the wake up call, like it served as just like a turning point. So, and here you are.
Yeah.
So, okay, when you were living in those like weeks or months of like feeling the burnout escalating or building in your body, do you think you knew it was burnout, or like what in retrospect, what were like the things that you were feeling that could have like indicated that that's what you were experiencing?
Yeah. Exhaustion.
Okay.
I mean, I think exhaustion was the first piece because, again, going back to the rumination, I could never turn my brain off. And so I wasn't sleeping. And I wasn't taking care of myself. I feel like, I mean, this was 2023, but I feel like I was still living in like the pandemic where we were like eating out every night because we wanted to support the local businesses. And it was 3 years later and we were still doing that. So yeah, exhaustion, not taking care of myself. The other thing, and I thought of this as I was reflecting on this experience, was just this detachment from everything except my work. And what I mean by that is we were in a position where we were fortunate enough to have a nanny who we adored. And I knew I had her every day until 6 o'clock. And so whether or not I actually had urgent work to be doing, I would just stay at work until 6 o'clock because I knew my kids were taken care of by somebody else. And that, looking back on it, like, why was I doing that?
It was just like a cycle on repeat that you were just like, when you're in a burnout cycle, you do have a really hard time, like sourcing from within, or even like looking within and really seeing what's right. Like your thoughts become a little bit clouded.
Yes.
Yeah. It's interesting that you bring up the lack of like decision making, whether it was from, within you or, whatever the reason was, you weren't making the decisions that you knew you needed to make or feeling empowered to do that.
Yeah.
And that is one of the like major contributors to burnout. Like if specifically we're talking about workplace burnout, like a lack of autonomy, a lack of like feeling like you have the power to make decisions for yourself or like within your scope of work.
Yeah.
Some of the other ones that I thought were really interesting are and maybe like related in a lot of ways, but like poor work-life balance. And it sounds like, if you're staying at work every day until 6, like poor work-life balance, unclear goals or expectations. I know you're a goal setter, so I don't know if that one applies, but it can be really relevant for a lot of people if they don't have something to like really work towards.
Yeah, and I think it's good, and I want you to keep going and sharing these. I don't know that one was something that I struggled with, like I said, I enjoyed what I was doing, and we were starting to get clear on a vision, so I knew I was working towards something. And I just want to go back to the decisioning. I think because I was so exhausted and feeling a little detached, it's almost like I wasn't trusting myself, to make the decisions that I knew were right. And again, it gets into that ruminating and just like second guessing myself. But okay, keep going on with your list.
and that is like a hallmark of burnout, is like that self-doubt that just like manifests itself really deep. It's the worst. Yeah, it is the worst. Okay, here are just a couple others. Like lack of support, perfectionism or unrealistic expectations, lack of recognition or reward. I don't think that's in like a like showy everybody, but just like when you're working really hard and you're achieving things and accomplishing things, it's like human nature to want those around you to like lift you up a little bit. Toxic environments, ignoring self-care, and here's a big one, constant emotional labor. That's like I think as like moms and women, we have, that's one of the reasons that we're here today, like all of the, not just the roles and expectations, but like we, a lot of us work full-time, we raise kids, we're the magic makers at the holidays, and we're the, coordinators of the schedules, but also like when the kids are having difficulty at school, like we're the ones that carry that load with them. And I think that the amount of emotional labor that like women and moms are doing today in and out of the workplace is like enormous. Yeah.
Well, and you think about what are the external factors that are impacting this burnout, because I, being a year and a half removed, I can look back on it and see like what could I control, right? But there's also a lot of external factors, and this whole like super mom idea, is one of them, right? And I'm just going to go on record as saying I don't want to be a super mom.
I know. Cheers to that.
Right?
No super moms here.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't mean that I don't want to be a good mom, but if someone wants to, take my kids and have a really cool experience, like go do that, right? Like I don't have to be the creator of all of that.
Yeah. Well, the fact that you can, I mean, make space for the kids to have those opportunities, but like knowing, especially like when is the time to rest and when is the time to really like do all of the things with your kids. And you can't be super mom and also build a business, be a great wife, contribute to your community, like whatever the things are that are important to you. Yeah. Like if you want to be super mom because from somewhere within you that feels aligned with your purpose, then it feels easier than it does for maybe those of us who like don't feel that sense of alignment.
Yeah,
we
that's
feel like
a really good point.
We're working like twice as hard to do the things that for somebody else it comes like really naturally.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that there were a couple of other things. I know I've shared like part of my burnout story here and there. And I know you mentioned like exhaustion as something that really like, stood out to you. Yeah. Did you notice like that you were like more irritable or reactive?
Yes.
Or, like,
yes.
Yeah, it is. It's like, I think that that's just like another hallmark sign of like burnout. A couple other things like overcommitment. So like when you start to resent the commitments you've made, maybe you've made them like with really good intentions. Yeah. But then when the time comes to actually like do the things that you said you were going to do, you're like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah. I recently read something where it said, say yes today for your future self, right? Like don't say yes to something because you want to do it today. Say yes because the person 2 weeks from now is also going to want to do it. Yeah. And that's just like taking, a pause to say, am I going to really want to do that thing in 2 weeks? Am I going to have the capacity, the energy to show up the way I want to? And the irritability thing, I mean, I know I was not the best person to be around. Right. And the other thing too that I'll add to this, and I don't know if you were going to get to this, but the other thing, and I didn't share this earlier, but I want to say it was, so the story I just shared with you, I think was maybe like a Monday night. I want to say that Sunday, I went to the movies with my daughter, and I think we saw like The Little Mermaid live action or something like that. And I couldn't even enjoy that. Like I just walked out with this like sense of dread. And that was another like telltale sign for me where I was like, if I can't even find joy in The Little Mermaid, like something's off, right?
Dread, I think that's a common thread that a lot of people do feel when they're entering a burnout cycle or they're living through a burnout cycle. I know like with my therapist, I had brought up that feeling of dread several times, and she's like, okay, we gotta talk about this a little bit more because you really, that's like a feeling that has a lot of other like signs and things associated with it. And so dread's a big one. But okay, I want to go back to when you said, I love your idea. I love what you said about like saying yes for your future self.
Oh yeah.
Okay, can I offer like one small reframe?
Yeah.
Okay. Instead of say yes today for your future self, let's say yes tomorrow for your future self. And practice the pause first, because if it's something that you're not sure about or you're feeling too impulsively like it's a yes, maybe you buy yourself a little bit of time, especially if you're in a burnout cycle or think you might be. Like that pause is so important. Where like that. You don't owe anybody an answer right away. Right? I think
it's not life and death.
Right. And I think we react so quickly when somebody asks something of us. Like especially if we're like in that like mode where we're just like reacting and answering and going through the like phases. I think that it's really hard to just pause and be like, wait, I need to check in with myself. I need to like go into my body and be like, what do I want?
Yeah.
And sometimes you need a night to sleep on it.
Right.
Yeah.
That's really good.
Yeah, I love that pause. I love the pause.
Well, and now you have me thinking, and we'll go off on this tangent, and then maybe we'll come back.
Yeah, we'll get there.
I love the pause. Mm-hmm. You're right, because sometimes you do just need to sleep on it. Mm-hmm. There's value in that. And then I also love, I'm sure you've heard no is a complete sentence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you taught me that. I love that.
Well, I don't know that I love it anymore.
Oh, okay.
So, I think because it's easier said than done. Like, I don't know about you, but if someone asks me to do something, and I'm going to take what you said because it's good advice. I'm going to pause. I'm going to sleep on it. And then if ultimately tomorrow the answer is no, I have a hard time like stopping at no. I want to say more. I can't just say like no, period. Mm-hmm. What I'm going to get better at and what I'm trying to get better at is saying no because, and taking that as an opportunity to explain to the person, like it's not just a no, and letting them like figure out why I said no, like, oh, she's just rude, like she doesn't want to help me. Mm-hmm. It's no because I have this other commitment, or I can't do it right now, but it's not no forever. Ask me again in 2 months. Please ask me again in 2 months. Mm-hmm. And it's a way to, I think, maybe like build your relationship with that person. You are sharing a little bit about yourself with them. Mm-hmm. And you're also not just leaving it to them to make up a story that maybe isn't the truth, that, might ultimately hurt your relationship. Does that make sense?
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're coming at that like from a place of like compassion and, wanting to make sure that you have the opportunity to tell the whole story.
Yes.
I wonder though, if we should be prepared for both though, because I think sometimes no has to be a complete answer.
Okay.
And I think that's uncomfortable for us. And I think that our nervous systems and our bodies at least will do everything that they can to protect us from feeling discomfort. Yeah. I mean, not that we want to be like mean or like too stern and just say no, but I think we have to be prepared for it. I think the explanation then that you follow it up with, like at least being aware of, is that explanation coming for you or for them? And not that you should only be thinking about yourself, but sometimes your body needs you to like just have that awareness of like, am I giving them this explanation because I don't want them to create stories about me that aren't true? Yeah. Or is it because I want to live within my integrity and just give them like a little bit more info? Yeah. But I think I think it's coming down to like having that awareness of like, are you doing it because you want to be a people pleaser? Yeah. Or are you doing it because it's going to satisfy something inside of you that wants to just like give them that little bit more? Yeah. Yeah, I don't know.
I want to get to the second one.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, of course, always we have to come from a place of compassion, but I think that sometimes that's what leads to our burnout cycles. Sure. Yeah. Of people pleasing and of always I guess having that subconscious motive of like, what's the other person going to think of me? What's the story that they're going to tell inside their minds about me? And wanting to have like control over that. Yeah. And it goes back to like the detachment almost that we talked about last time, where like sometimes we can't control what they're going to think or say about us, and we have to be okay with that. Yeah. And sometimes if no is a complete answer, with that has to come the acceptance that they might just paint their own story of what happened. I don't know.
I feel like we've come full circle with this because, I started this conversation by saying how much of a ruminator I am. Yes. Yeah. So, I think we can hold both, right? Yes. There are times when no could be a complete sentence. Mm-hmm. And like you said, I want to get to that second part where no, comma, because I want to hold true to my integrity and my person, and use this as an opportunity to build a stronger connection with somebody.
Yes. Yeah. That now we're in alignment. Yeah. Well, you're, like your purpose, it's all, but you have that like self-awareness to know why you're doing the things that you're doing. I think like when it comes down to it, burnout is rooted in our nervous systems,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that for a lot of us, our nervous systems are dysregulated. And, if we talk about like what's the difference between like feeling stress
Yeah.
and burnout, a lot of it I think comes down to nervous system regulation.
Yeah.
So like highest level, parasympathetic nervous system is the nervous system we're supposed to be living in most of the time, right?
Yeah.
It's like rest and digest. And when our nervous system gets activated, it's when we move into fight or flight, right? And then we're moving into the sympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
So when you experience like stress or even burnout on like a modified level, like maybe you planned this massive event,
Yeah.
and you're feeling really worn down from planning the event, and the event comes and you promptly get sick the next day,
Yeah.
and you just like lay in bed for a week because you're exhausted from everything you just did. But at that point, you're able to re-regulate your nervous system and get back to baseline after you take the rest that you need. That's an indication that like the stress or burnout that you experienced in that time was sort of situational.
Yeah. Well, so I'm so glad that you're bringing up this difference between stress and burnout. And, if I'm being honest, I got sick exactly after what you just described. So I had this work trip, and then I had a really awesome workshop that I planned, and then I got sick. And the difference between now and maybe a year and a half from now is I'm fortunate enough now and self-aware enough now. Mostly, I still overdid it a little bit, but to know that, I can't, I have to rest to not fix this, but to recover from this, right? And thankfully, I work with someone now, you, who when I said 4 times in a row, I can't do it today, I can't do it today, I can't do it today, you said rest.
Yeah.
And we'll do it when we can, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that, like what you were saying, like stress to some extent can be good for us, right? Like it can heighten our level of awareness. It can actually get us to perform better. But when that stress becomes chronic and you're not able to interrupt it with rest and recovery is when you ultimately end up in burnout.
Yep. Yeah. So burnout becomes like a total dysregulation of your nervous system. I've explained like on my burnout journey and nervous system regulation process over the past few years that my nervous system has felt like, when you're driving a car.
Yeah.
And you put your foot on the gas and like the gears shoot up.
Yeah.
And it's like you just tap the gas, but like, and it feels like a total massive like overcorrection or like, the gears are definitely out of line for like where you're trying to go in the car. My nervous system has felt like that at times where I just cannot like bring myself down to regulation. And that's because I spent years in a chronic burnout cycle. I spent years not even like living in my sympathetic nervous system. I didn't even know what it felt like to live in my parasympathetic nervous system. Like if you take a deep breath, like do it right now. Ready?
Yeah.
Take a deep breath and try to get it all the way down to your belly.
I did it.
Okay. So when this journey started for me, I couldn't get my breath past my chest.
Yes.
And there would be times where I was training my body to take that deep breath that I would feel like I was gulping for air. And that's actually a major sign that your nervous system is dysregulated because you're not, like, it's those deep breaths, not to get too scientific, but like a lot of times that it'll like stimulate your vagus nerve, which is then what helps get you from sympathetic into your parasympathetic nervous system.
Yeah.
Breathing is like one of the most important things.
Well, I'm glad you brought up breathing because we've talked about this before. And I remember you asking me that question, like, can you take a deep breath like that?
Yeah.
And I don't think I could do that on cue until recently. And I would say to you, the only time, or one of the few times I can take a deep breath like that is when I'm walking my dog. And just, it's physical activity, which is also good to help break your stress or complete your stress cycle, which I want us to talk about in a second. But that was like the only time where I guess I felt free enough, calm enough that I could take a whole, and I would like catch myself, like, how many deep breaths can I take?
Yeah, it's uncomfortable when you're first
but
doing
it feels so good when you can do it.
And that exhale, especially if you like sigh or hum
Yeah.
while you do it,
Yeah.
those are really good ways to like release anything like pent up in your body, like to release them.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's funny. We still bring up COVID a lot because I feel like we're traumatized from it to some extent.
We are.
Yes, we are. We will be. I know, we carry that. I was at a train station, and it was when I was first starting to like practice deep breathing, right? And I was like standing there were all these people around, and I had this moment of realization that like I think that the time that I started to habitually be a really shallow breather was during COVID, because I think somewhere in my subconscious mind I was like, well, if I just take a small breath while I'm in public, I'm taking in less germs. And so I think that was actually one of the reasons why I like my nervous system got so messed up, because I was literally never activating my parasympathetic nervous system through that deep breathing. But anyway, I know it's wild.
I think you're onto something.
Could be. I know. But now I just need to process it and figure out how to, get that out of my body.
So can we talk a little bit about stress and burnout? I want to like go deeper into that. And we've already distinguished that they're two separate things, right?
Yeah. So it's like it's like it's
like a continuum,
it's like a spectrum. It's like a spectrum. So okay, when you're let's talk about it in like maybe like the workplace, or because like there's always a source of the stress, which we can talk about. So the first phase is really like a honeymoon phase. So whatever you're doing that's going to ultimately lead to your burnout is, it probably feels really like exciting still. You're enjoying just like the work that you're doing. And maybe you're feeling like a little bit stressed, or know that you're like working a little bit more. But it's still like filling your bucket, like giving you energy. But then as the scales start to like tip a little bit, and you start to feel like you're working more and working harder, and you have like a little less control over what you're doing, because your pipeline's too full, or you have too much on your plate. That's when it starts to become stress. Once the stress becomes long term is when it starts to become chronic stress. So here is usually when you start to have like the body reactions. At this point you might start experiencing like migraines. You might start to feel like a little bit resentful around the work that you're doing, the commitments that you've made. And you're probably really tired all the time at this point. Not just physically, but also mentally and emotionally. So we've gone from honeymoon phase to stress to chronic stress, and we're feeling the migraines, we're feeling that like depletion. So we move into burnout when it's like that long-term pattern of depletion. And we don't interrupt the cycle of stress where it becomes burnout. And so this is the point where stress just overwhelms you. You're drained, detached. You probably feel unable to cope with like day-to-day tasks. You might be like taking steps back from your social life. You really can't handle even just like small talk as easily. Social obligations or social commitments, I guess, feel like obligations, or feel like just one extra thing to do. And even if you're still working really, really hard, the work that you're doing is probably pretty like unproductive. And not then your best. Then you enter, so when you're living in that phase for long enough, it's different for everybody, but it is when that cycle is uninterrupted that we then move into chronic burnout. And chronic burnout is really like where you, in order to like bounce back from a chronic burnout, it usually takes like really significant life changes in order for you to like get back to like a normal level of baseline. So and it's usually in chronic burnout that you experience like the physical and the mental impacts. Like chronic pain and chronic burnout go hand in hand. And then of course, like I think we can anxiety doesn't have to be related to any of this stuff, but you might at this point have like chronic anxiety that you have a hard time controlling, or like depressive symptoms or depression. So it's like, it's that phase of chronic burnout that, I mean, all of us need to avoid as much as we can. Take it from me, because I think that is the phase. I think I was stuck in chronic burnout for well over a year, maybe 2 years, and it has taken significant life changes for me to like find a new baseline.
Yeah.
And once you get into that phase of like burnout and chronic burnout, once you know what to do to heal it, and I think we should talk about that.
Yeah.
You are a lot more susceptible to like burning out again though. So it's like, it's not like you ever totally heal. It's like you're always kind of just managing it so that your nervous system doesn't like flip back into burnout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I like how you explained all of those levels, because I think all I had thought about was stress, chronic stress, burnout.
Mm-hmm.
And I think probably because that's where I got to. I got to burnout. I don't know that I was in chronic burnout, but I was at burnout. So I guess the question is, how do you, especially if once you get to chronic burnout, you're more prone to it coming back. How do you stop it before you get there?
Well, guys, we have so much to say on this subject that we just went on and on and on and enjoyed every second of our conversation. But because of that, we are going to have you wait until next week to enjoy the second half of our conversation. So stay tuned next week as we talk a little bit more about interrupting the burnout cycle through self-discovery and release and all of the other fun things. So we will see you next week.